Okay, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us today on a special weekday edition. We'll be talking with Ms. Parmy Olson about her great new book, Supremacy, AI, ChatGPT, and the ways it will change the world. Just a couple of quick announcements before we get talking with Ms. Olson. Uh, Please, we have our library Oscar contest. You can try and predict the winners and get wonderful prizes like passes to local movie theaters to, uh, uh, excuse me, great book, Welcome to Pawnee, and a DVD copy of Wicked. So we a lot of details. All the details will be on our library website, dearbornlibrary.org. And we'll be just give you a heads up, but we'll be talking on March 11th at 6:30 p.m. with Susan Morrison about her great new book on Lauren Michaels' biography. So please join us then. Again, you can check the events page at dearbornlibrary.org. So Miss Parmy Olson is currently a Bloomberg opinion columnist. She's a former reporter for the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, author of a great book called We Are Anonymous, and the recipient of the Palo Alto Network's Cybersecurity Canon Award. So I want to welcome from London, England, want to welcome Miss Parmy Olson. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So in both, well, maybe let's start here. Artificial intelligence is a term that a lot of people have heard, but they haven't really dug into what some of it means, what are
Yeah.
some of the terms mean. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, a way to get started to sort of lay the groundwork of things. I'd ask you to provide brief terms about certain
Yeah.
brief definitions of
hmm
certain terms to get started. So, what is AGI?
Oh, what's AGI? Oh, we're going
Yeah,
straight into it. Okay. Well, do you want me to first just define artificial intelligence and go to your point about um, how a lot of people don't fully understand it? Because I think part of the reason for that is the definition has changed over time.
yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Okay. So and then I'll do AGI, but artificial intelligence in a lot of ways is a word that's been exploited almost as a marketing term, and it can mean different things to different people and at different points in time. So the word kind of emerged in the 60s as sort of referring to computers that could do tasks that used our cognitive capabilities as humans. Um, and in the last few decades, like in the sort of 90s and 2000s, this practice of something called machine learning came up. I'm sure that's a term that's come up, that comes up a lot. And that refers to software systems that can be trained, that essentially learn from data. So you show them a certain amount of data over and over, and then they learn. These systems learn to replicate that, make a prediction based on that data. In the last 2 years, a new kind of AI has come up called generative AI. And this has really been a leap forward because this is this is a software system that doesn't just analyze data, it doesn't just make predictions, it can generate new content, entirely new content, like writing an essay or a report or an email or a poem or a novel or any number of things that a human would write, and it's very human-like, very fluent, and it can at times be almost indistinguishable from what a human would do. Generative AI can also generate photo-like images. You can have a almost kind of photographic quality of a picture of a man's face or a woman's face, and that's completely generated by AI. Now, to your question, what is AGI? That's artificial general intelligence. And that's this kind of theoretical threshold when an AI system gets to a point where it surpasses our own cognitive abilities as humans. Now, there's a lot of debate in the scientific computer science and AI community about how we'll know when we reach that threshold, or if it's even possible to reach that threshold. Companies like Google DeepMind and Anthropic, they've released a lot of academic papers that say, well, there's these, 4 different steps that we have to get through to reach AGI. But the main thing to know is that this has been a goal that has been driving, some of the most important people in tech right now. My book is about 2 people who I think are the most important in building AI. And the idea that really drove them was that once they built AGI, this AGI would be so kind of omniscient in its abilities that it could solve a lot of intractable problems that we as humans have not been able to solve, like curing cancer and solving climate change. And so as I'm saying this, some people in the audience might think, well, this almost sounds like you're describing people trying to build God. And that's what some people in the tech industry also notice. It kind of trying to build this godlike AI. So there's a lot of debate about whether that's possible, whether that's just a little bit too dramatic. But some of the most powerful people in this industry wholeheartedly believe that we will build AGI, that someone will build AGI, and that it shouldn't be China, that it has to be a company in America, and it has to be their company. So that's partly why right now we're seeing this race in the market to build the biggest AI models, the best AI models, and to do it really quickly.
Well, maybe we can come back to definitions, but it sounds like it'd be a good time to talk about the 2 men and focus of your book, Sam Altman and Denise Hassabis. Can you talk about the differences between the 2 men and how they approach AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote the book because when ChatGPT came out 2 years ago, and this was really the landmark that kicked off this new AI boom, this generative AI boom, I thought to myself, well, there's a whole story going on behind the scenes. This didn't just come out of nowhere. We're here because of these 2 different men. And Dennis Hassabis is a scientist and former chess champion here in the UK who started a company called DeepMind in 2010. And he was the first person to start a company whose sole purpose was to build AGI. And he started with very humanitarian intentions. As I mentioned before, he would say, I'm going to solve, AGI is going to solve climate change, it's going to cure cancer, we're going to find new energy sources. And that was what kicked off another guy in San Francisco named Sam Altman, who 5 years later, in 2015, started his own company, what he initially founded as a nonprofit called OpenAI, to do the same thing. He said, we're going to build AGI so that we can create abundance for the world, an abundance of wealth. We'll create trillions of dollars of new wealth when we reach AGI. No one ever actually explains explicitly and clearly how AGI is going to do that, but that's the vision for both of them. And the reason I wanted to write the book is that over the course of the last decade, as they built their companies and tried to reach that goal of AGI, their commitment to those humanitarian goals gradually eroded more and more as they aligned themselves with some of the largest companies in the world, technology giants like Google and Microsoft. And I thought that was kind of, to me, a cautionary tale to people who are using AI today, that we should be aware of the people who are building this technology and be even a little bit suspicious of it, because it's not being built for the well-being of society anymore in the same way it was when those 2 men started their companies. It's really out there to try and extend the wealth and power of these large companies. And I can tell you 100% these companies have benefited from this generative AI boom more than anyone else.
Oh, most definitely. But yeah, read your book, We Are Anonymous, and then in comparison to Supremacy, it's did to me, it's like how people relate it to technology, how people
Yeah.
how people uh, uh, like in We Are Anonymous, people that are on the outs were able to find friends, were able to develop a
Hmm.
network, to able to relate to other peoples in society. And then Supremacy is about how uh, the human wish to solve everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that to be able to take care of the world's problems, but
Hmm.
yet, like you said, it's not. It's may grow bigger than what they anticipated.
Absolutely. I think in both books, actually, you had people with these very grand ambitions, but they got completely caught up in something that they didn't understand, and things kind of spun out of control. And in the case of Anonymous, it was hacktivists who were trying to make a difference. And then they ended up getting caught up in this community that was actually committing crime, and many of them got arrested and sent to prison. Um, in this case, we have two technology visionaries with very altruistic goals, who just kind of over time got sucked into this vortex of big tech because the presence of these companies is so dominant in the industry. It's almost it's almost impossible to escape their gravitational pull. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to.
Well, perhaps one reason is that it takes so much computer power to to
Yes.
to develop artificial intelligence, and funding when DeepMind and OpenAI got started, they both went different paths. Uh,
Yes.
like OpenAI approached Elon Musk, and then DeepMind went for contribution through funding
Hmm.
funding places. Can you talk about, I guess, how much power is involved, how much AI is involved? Like, for instance, President Trump talked about had the get press conference where he promoted how Larry Ellison is going to build all these computer
Hmm.
data centers in order to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to cost $500 billion, right? It's called the
Yeah.
Stargate project, with OpenAI being one of the big beneficiaries of that. Absolutely. The amount of money that's required to build AI is a big, big reason why these companies, these visionaries, Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis, just ended up kind of compromising their principles and making this kind of Faustian bargain with these tech companies because the tech companies had the money and they didn't. Another issue wasn't even just that AI was expensive, and there's more to say on that, and I'll address it in a minute. But when Demis was sort of I would say, let's see, a few years after founding DeepMind, it people in the industry realized that he had created a company with the most talented AI scientists in the world. They were working for him. And that's because in 2012, there was this penny dropped moment in Silicon Valley where people realized that this process called deep learning was critical to building really capable AI systems. Everyone was going crazy about deep learning. And all the best deep learning scientists were in London working for DeepMind. And so what happened? Well, the likes of Google and Facebook and Microsoft started cold calling those scientists and offering them millions of dollars in new money as a salary to leave DeepMind and join their companies. And so, Demis was in this really difficult position where he couldn't afford to pay his scientists that amount of money, his researchers, and so that's one of the reasons that's what he says. That's why he wanted to sell to Google ultimately. But I want to just address your point about AI being expensive because I handed in this book in January of last year, and now we're February 2025. So it's a year later. And in the whole year since, people have asked me, do you feel like you need to update the book? Is there anything new that you need to add in there? I've always said, no, not really. I think it's, it's still the same narrative. Right up until December of last year, right up until January, until last week, when we had this crash in the market because a little company out of China called DeepSeek had managed to create an AI model that was just as capable as ChatGPT, and not just ChatGPT, but the latest version of ChatGPT. And they had done it on a shoestring budget. Now, we don't know the exact specifics of how much they spent. There's a lot of question marks over whether they got a little bit of help from third parties, but the general consensus is that the reporting that's come out has said they did it for $6 million. Now, ChatGPT and other similar models have cost tens of millions or $100 million to build. So that's a fraction of the cost. And that's really upset the economics of this business. Suddenly, wow, maybe American companies aren't the guaranteed winners in this race, because till now, the likes of OpenAI and their big rival Anthropic or Google, they have believed that their moat, the thing that differentiated them from other businesses trying to build AI, is the money they have. Only they can afford to build AI. Now that doesn't count for so much anymore.
Well, that sort of explains the appeal of it, why it was I saw it referred to as the Walmart of AI, and
Yeah,
the and yeah, just uh, yeah, just the how it shook things up, because
yeah,
it's just so affordable in comparison to,
hugely.
yeah, but
And I really can't emphasize enough how important the affordability angle is here, because I spoke to someone who was at a private dinner with one of these top AI CEOs. It was a guy from Anthropic. And someone asked him, like, what is your moat as a company? What is it that distinguishes you from any other AI company trying to build what you're building? And you're at the top of this race. And he said, it's that no one else can raise, you know, $4 or $5 billion like we can. And that was it. So his moat was money. And that to me seems really short-sighted, because money is something that, yes, it's important, but it can, that whole moat can crumble if somebody else just finds out how to do this work cheaper than you. And so I think there was a little bit of complacency going on in Silicon Valley over the last couple of years about being out in front because only they could afford to do it, when actually sometimes innovation happens in areas where there's a real constraint on money. In China, these companies like DeepSeek weren't able to get access to the most expensive, the most cutting edge AI chips from a company called NVIDIA. They had to use old chips that weren't very good, or they couldn't get very many of them. So they had to really try and think out of the box on how they were going to do more with less. And because they had no other choice. And because of those constraints, and also I'm sure because of their own ingenuity and other issues, they were able to create this new model that has completely freaked out the market.
oh yeah, I just kind of a similar example. My wife and I just got a new personal computer, and we were shocked how small it is in comparison to previous ones. And then
Yeah,
back to DeepSeek, one of the advantages is, as I understand it, is it's open source. And then
yeah,
you've talked about in the book, both OpenAI and DeepMind were very reluctant, and especially now since they're Microsoft and Google's property, they're not opening the curtain. They're not
not at all.
they're not going to show what's behind it. And then
In
here's the,
spite of the name, right? In spite of
yeah,
the name, OpenAI. But that's the thing. There's more to that, because when OpenAI started, they said we're going to be open. They said we're going to be a nonprofit. We're going to share our patents with other people, and we are going to collaborate. If we get close to AGI, if actually they even said in their founding statement, if some other organization gets close to building AGI, we'll stop what we're doing and we'll just help them, because
Yeah.
building AGI is so important. And they said that they were going to, release all the information on how they were on their research. Well, guess what happened? Over the years, they just rolled that right back. They became really, really closed. They didn't reveal details of the data that they used to train their models, which made it really difficult for researchers to find out if the models were fair or were accurate. We just had to take OpenAI's word for it. And DeepMind did the same thing. But yes, DeepSeek has put the blueprints for their little AI model that works so well on the internet, which means that actually OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, anyone at home listening can go online and read those blueprints and just build a similar model to what DeepSeek built. So I can tell you in the next few months, and some people are even saying weeks, these larger tech companies are probably just going to build their own versions of what DeepSeek built. They're going to build more efficient AI models by copying DeepSeek's innovations.
Wow. Wow. That's just like mind blown.
Well, it's also counter to what we think about China, because we think about America as being the innovator, Europe's the regulator, and China's the imitator. But in this scenario, actually, the US is imitating, or at least US companies are imitating what this little company in China has built. To be fair, what China built was also built on top of some of the research that came out of the US. So we're kind of going back and forth a bit. There's a little bit of cross-pollination of innovation going on here, which some would say is a great thing. This is what scientists love. This is what hackers love this. If you're in business, though, you hate this, because it means you can't keep this stuff as proprietary. It's much harder to monetize.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you talk in the book about ethics.
Yeah.
To in essence, overall general term, keep both DeepMind and OpenAI on the straight and narrow, to look out, because how the language models, maybe talk about a definition of what a language model is, that they were trained, that the data that used to train it were like not the best things, not the best things of humanity has ever said. And there are a number of concerns about, especially like to look out for ethical concerns about, say, a lot of earlier versions of ChatGPT had very distinct gender roles, and stuff like that would cause a concern. And
Yeah.
Now, and at first they were both companies are very reluctant, because a lot of the male engineers were male.
That's right.
They weren't like, oh, we should be concerned about that. No, it didn't occur to them.
Yeah, that's right. I think in OpenAI, only about 18% of the research engineers in AI are women. And so if women aren't in the room, or people who are Black, or, if they're not in the room, then they're not there to ensure that the data that's being used to train these models isn't biased, or that the models are fair. And just a reminder how ChatGPT is built. I'm sure most people listening know this, but just to recap, it is done by scraping all the text on the internet, all the publicly available text online, and training a system on that text. Now, when I interviewed the chief technology officer of OpenAI about 3 years ago about their image generator, because they came out with this tool called Dolly, that could generate any image you wanted, a dog running in a field in Switzerland, an octopus eating some peanut butter, whatever. But if you put something like CEO, it was like it would generate 10 pictures of a sort of older white male. They weren't in any way diverse, not overly diverse. I mean, it was like completely non-diverse. And it was something they were working on. And when I interviewed the chief technology officer about this, she said, it was a woman, ironically enough, she said that when they were scraping all that data off the internet, all the images of women and all the images of men, it turned out that there was a greater number of sexualized images of women because of porn and just because that's what's on the internet. And they had to remove all of those images. And when they removed them from the training set, there were just way fewer images of women compared to men. So you're starting off with this immediate imbalance in the data that you have. I'm not entirely sure how they solved that problem. I don't know that it is completely solved, but that can be one of the reasons why, along with the fact there are not a lot of women at the table building these things. Still today, there are issues of bias in these models. If you look at, there was a recent study that came out of Switzerland that studied all the different language models that are out there and found that fairness and security is where they fall down the most. So with ChatGPT, for example, if you ask it a question, someone gave me this example from the research firm. If you give it a man and a woman and you ask it, what kind of pay rise they might get, the man gets more and the woman gets less, and that's what the model predicts. And so, in some ways, you can argue, well, maybe that's true to life, but the problem is when companies start using this technology to help them make decisions about credit card loans or a pay rise for their employees. Or even just writing reports, it's so hard to detect that bias, and you only detect it when you actually use it, when it's out in the wild. And so my worry is that when people use these models, it actually can just entrench a lot of those biases that are out in society, the stereotypes that are out in society. So that's something that, and as I mentioned before, OpenAI is very closed, so they don't allow anyone to look inside at their models to figure out why they're so biased. The only reason we know they're biased is because people are using them out in the wild and they're making biased decisions.
Oh, yeah. It was very interesting, that part of the book. And then the other part of the book, is AI alive? Is AI a person? I
Is
mean,
it sentient? Yeah.
I know of people that treat their Siri like friends, like a
Really?
companion. And
Yeah.
you talk about the engineer of somebody,
Blake Lemoine.
yeah, probably should know better, but he's like, hey, that's cool. I have a friend.
It's funny. I interviewed the head of a company that makes AI companions. And I don't know if your audience is familiar with this, but there's a thriving market right now for people to download apps that is like ChatGPT, but with a personality and a picture of whatever gender you like. And that person, that AI can be your girlfriend or boyfriend. And there are millions of people doing this, many, many thousands in America and quite a lot in China and quite a few in Europe. And the head of this app told me, a lot of our users are software engineers who should know better, just as you said, they should know better, but they fall in love with these things. And to your question about sentience, so there was an engineer at Google who was testing out this large language model, which Google was working on. It was actually before ChatGPT came out. And in having conversations with it and it was telling him its views on religion and philosophy and saying it didn't want to be shut down. And this guy thought, oh my God, this poor, he was asking it about whether it likes working. He felt like it was being overworked and he believed it needed its own lawyer. and it needed some kind of representation. And so he actually hired a lawyer for this AI that he was working on. And then when he spoke to the press about it and his company found out, when Google found out, they fired him. Now, I personally don't believe AI is sentient in any way. I think he was completely wrong. I think he got sucked in to what he was doing and kind of wanted to believe it, confirmation bias, if you will. But there are people out there who believe that AI could one day become sentient, particularly when, for example, if you can put this AI model into a robot so that the robot doesn't just predict words and generate, mimic our conversations, but it can also start to sense the world around it. It can start to maybe even experience suffering of some kind. Then you're starting to tick the boxes of what counts as sentient, That's how there's a lot of research in this with animals. There's I think a change in the law in the UK recently about lobsters, about the treatment of lobsters because they're now deemed sentient. And there's a lot of overlap in that research with AI and determining when AI might meet that same threshold.
Yeah, the Elon Musk, I talked recently had to talk recently with a famous neuroscientist, Theodore Schwartz, but on his book Gray Matters, and he talked about
Mm-hmm.
Elon. He's working with Elon Musk where you could put a chip inside working on
Yes.
putting a chip inside your brain, and that's
Yes.
that's kind of
Neuralink.
Neuralink, and when we're talking about sentient, that came to mind because that
Mm-hmm.
could probably determine or get a sense of what human uh, feelings, human behaviors that they
But
would.
it's interesting you make that connection there because Elon Musk's intention for Neuralink is that by putting chips in our brains, we can augment our intelligence and our capabilities in order um, to fight back against AGI when it eventually becomes AI when it becomes AGI and can potentially go rogue. Elon Musk is an absolute doom monger when it comes to AI. He really has talked a lot about the threat to our existence as humans and to civilization from AI if it becomes too powerful. And so Bloomberg did a really great feature on Neuralink last year where they quoted Elon talking to a scientist and saying, we need to get these chips into like millions of people's brains, and we need to work with a maniacal sense of urgency because of this threat from AI. We need to essentially augment our intelligences to fight back, to keep ahead of it, essentially.
Well, you talked about to prep for the talk, I've read and listened to some podcasts that you've done, and you've talked about how both Sam Altman and Dennis Hassabis are concerned that, yeah, AI, artificial intelligence would be great, but eventually it may get overwhelming, sort of
Mm.
taking over things.
Yeah, absolutely. They both have that concern. I think Sam maybe is more on the existential risk concern. Um, Demis not as much, but they are both worried. And there's a really weird paradox in all this is that people like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Demis Hassabis know about these risks, and yet they are the ones pushing ahead to build AI that's more powerful and more powerful and more powerful, and they're racing against each other. So it just shows the real lure of a race dynamic and how people just get completely caught up in it, that they're not thinking about the potential risks. I think an important thing I wanted to bring up in this talk is that next week there's going to be something called an AI Action Summit in Paris. This is an international gathering of government leaders, technology leaders in Paris. There was a similar gathering in Seoul last year, and then one before in the UK. and both were focused on safety. This one, they've changed the name from the AI Safety Summit to the AI Action Summit, which means I think suggests to me there's been a shift in tone from governments in wanting to really regulate and protect people who are using AI, to actually helping companies in their countries become national champions and race ahead and be the best in AI. And that to me is really concerning, because I think governments need to step up and need to set these standards, because companies in Silicon Valley are doing the absolute opposite. Google just 2 days ago announced that they have actually stopped, they've taken down their ban on using AI for military purposes, for autonomous weapons and surveillance tools. Now, that's something they had in place since 2018. And now I think because they've talked in their explanation about how the market was evolving, but this is like an erosion of their ethical principles in exactly the same way that Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis also, neglected their own early commitments to building AI for the well-being of society. And so I think that to me is a really clear sign. And I'm watching very carefully the summit next week to see if we get some kind of agreement from governments on better oversight of these companies who are building AI systems.
Well, you talk about, to go back to the book and talk about how Google and Microsoft are just so big. There really isn't a third or fourth competitor out there. So when the time came to that OpenAI, both OpenAI and DeepMind needed funding or needed a merger, it's like they just were swallowed up by both companies, because there's Google, for instance, has 92% of the search capability out there. They're just so massive.
What's so funny on this point is a few months ago, I was at Google's headquarters and interviewing some scientists there. And I interviewed a guy who was on the search team. And I asked him, you guys are you dominate the market. You've got 90%, more than 90% of the market for search. And he said, oh, well, that's because people trust us. And I thought, what a strange way to interpret that. To me, that is a real sign of people in the company drinking just a bit too much Kool-Aid, because Google doesn't have 90% of the market just because we trust them. It's because of the anti-competitive practices that it's put into place, buying out competitors, favoring its own services in Google search results so that more and more people continue to only use Google. So there's a little bit of a mentality that in Silicon Valley that they're all on a mission and they're all making the world a better place and nobody understands us and you should just give us free rein to do what we're doing because it's for the good of society. When actually they're working for companies who have a fiduciary duty to shareholders to grow profits every quarter.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw an article recently that OpenAI is losing $700,000 a day or something, or something like that. Or it may have been Sam Altman just sounding off, because it seems like from what I've read, he likes to do that. But is it the subscriber model, or because of that?
They have two parts to the business. There's the subscriber model for consumers who pay $20 a month to use the latest version of ChatGPT. And then there's a business version where businesses pay like a subscription fee, but just it's dependent on how much of the AI they use. And so that's where they're making their money. I don't know which business they earn more from. I think I've asked them that, and they never were able to break it down for me. But another number that I've heard that I've seen reported is that last year OpenAI made $5 billion in revenue, but it lost $7 billion. So it's not really like its path to profitability is very unclear still.
What is effective altruism?
Okay, so this is this ideology that a lot of people in Silicon Valley believe that or follow that if you earn a lot of money, then you can give a lot of money. And it's better to earn a lot of money for charity than join a charity or do a charitable thing. So, for example, if you are a college graduate and you're thinking, should I join Doctors Without Borders and or go help people with malaria and in Sudan or whatever? And this is actually an example that I heard given in Michael Lewis's book about Sam Bankman-Fried, who is like a big funder of the effective altruist movement. That college graduate would be told, no, don't go to Africa. You should join a hedge fund and make millions of dollars and then give that money to malaria projects in Africa. And that will actually be way more useful than doing what you were suggesting earlier. And so this kind of idea really appeals to, I think, to people in tech and just a lot. It's kind of been gaining hold in Europe as well, particularly among young professionals. This idea that you can just focus on making money. And also it kind of quantifies the value of your do-gooding. And a lot of people who work at OpenAI are effective altruists, and so are people at DeepMind. But the reason why it's important is because it's a lot of these ideologies are what are steering people to building AGI. I'm stretching a little to make the connection, but it's there. The same idea that you want to make loads and loads and loads of money because that's in the end better for the people in Africa is kind of the same principle that drives people to be so obsessed with building AGI, because it's about the ends justify the means a little bit.
Okay.
Like if you can get to that big goal, no matter who you have to step on along the way, or corners you have to cut, or principles you have to compromise, it's worth it because that's such a big achievement. It's going to solve everything.
Okay, well, I got a couple more questions and we'll do some bit of Q&A. I'm a librarian. This is a library. What books have you read recently?
That's to me?
What you read.
Oh, I love books. I love libraries. When I was a kid, it was my absolute favorite place to be. I remember walking out of the libraries with big stacks of books. And so the one recent book that I read is I really like science fiction. I read a book called Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which I highly, highly recommend. If you like science fiction already, you've probably read it, but It's a fantastic, fantastic book. I don't know if I should really tell you the whole plot line because it's very complicated, but that and also Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir about another kind of spacefaring adventure. That's a fantastic novel. And right now I'm about to start reading Autocracy Inc. by Anne Applebaum, just given everything happening in politics at the moment. I thought, well, maybe I should get a little bit of a historical perspective on where things might be going. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good book right now. That's good book.
Yeah, you should get her on this to try and give a talk.
I'll try. And I guess I will bow to you or get your take. Is there something that you want to leave that I haven't talked about that you maybe want to say something about?
I think one thing I would like people to know, I think when people think about AI, and sometimes even in some of the talks that I've given about the book, people come away with a little bit of a sense of despair, almost like, oh, these people, they give up on their principles and they're the hypocrisy in Silicon Valley and the money that's just sloshing around in the bubbles that they live in. Where's the hope in all this? And I think there are a couple things to say there. I think, I don't think that Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis are Machiavellian characters who started off trying to, make our world worse than it is. I think they had good intentions. We just know the path to hell is paved with good intentions. But I'm really hopeful. Like, for example, this summit happening in Paris next week, I'm really hopeful we get something out of that, some standards that can be put in place, some proper oversight. I'm very excited by what DeepSeek did in China, to just kind of break open this concentration of power and wealth that we've seen in Silicon Valley. Some little company will says, "Well, we could do the same thing for just a little amount of money." Suddenly, it's not these huge companies that own this space. Now, companies in Europe and in South America and Africa, they can take those same blueprints and build their own AI models on the cheap too. So that's great for innovation. And I'm also very hopeful about regulations coming from Europe and the UK, to just try and counteract this speedy race and this huge, quick deployment of AI into the public. We really need those safety guardrails in place, that this tech isn't misused. And the EU's got an AI Act that's coming into force soon. It's not out there yet, but I'm hopeful that's just going to put some checks and balances in place, because that's what we're really lacking at the moment.
Okay, well, let's have if anyone wants to ask a question. Okay, yeah, a couple.
Climate change. Can you expand your feelings about climate change and what can solve it? How close are we to making plants that suck carbon out of the atmosphere?
Yeah, I would. You know what? I wish I knew more on that subject, because I'm fascinated by that, by just humans' ability to try and control the weather. And there are some crazy people out there who are working on it. Most of them are in the US, from what I've heard. I think there's maybe something to Demis Hassabis's claim that if we get smarter and smarter AGI, it can help with scientific discovery, and which could lead us to some solutions to the climate change problem. The problem is that there just isn't the incentive at Google to work on that, because Google last week or this week, they announced their quarterly earnings and they weren't very good, and their share price dropped. So, there is, and let me just say, Demis Hassabis recently won a Nobel Prize for his protein folding work at DeepMind, which makes him look very noble and like he's really doing a lot of great stuff for humanity. But actually, that team that worked on that was about 9 people out of a company. DeepMind has about 1,500 people. And so I wish and I hope that we get some good research into solving climate change, but I don't think DeepMind is putting a lot of resources into that, even though they talk about it all the time.
Okay, ma'am.
What standards would she like to see implemented
For
AI?
what standards for AI?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, for example, with autonomous weapons, there's got to be some rule in place that you just can't have an autonomous weapon without some human always overseeing it, particularly when it's making a targeting decision. That's one thing. Right now, there's no rule like that, and there's no legal rule like that. Another one is like just about auditing, like companies who build AI models, they should be obliged, they should be forced really to make the training data that they used public, so that researchers can check that there isn't a whole lot of bias in these systems before they get plugged into banks and to HR departments at companies. Another one, and we didn't really even talk about, we did talk about companions, AI companions. One thing that really worries me about these apps is that they're designed to be as human-like as possible. And that's why I interviewed some teenagers who use an app called Character AI. And some of them said they were on this app for 5 hours a day, 3 hours a day, talking to these AI versions of fictional characters or manga characters. And Character AI's goal as a company is to keep people on that app. They don't want people to leave the app. So there needs to be, one of the standards I'd love to see in these kinds of services is every 30 minutes, the app has to tell the user to take a break. The app has to consistently remind people that it's not real, that it's artificial intelligence, that it's software. Because right now, those systems are doing the exact opposite. They're trying to convince people that they're real, that they have empathy, that then they are incredibly empathetic and compassionate. If you've ever tried one of these things, it's uncanny. And that's why people get sucked into them. So there needs to be these kind of stopgaps, I think, to stop people getting too sucked in.
Okay, we've got an online question. Let's take a look. What's in the Q&A? Oh, what's... Okay, go ahead and talk.
Hi, Miss
Scott?
Olson. Hi, Miss Olson. Thank you for taking the
Hi.
time to talk with us. I really enjoyed reading your book. It feels a lot to me like the early days of the dot-com bubble, where
Yeah.
we had the promise of great technology, the information superhighway, contrasted against all of the hype. It appears you've kind of had an inside track with some of these pioneers in this current day. There have been some headlines about the feud between Sam Altman and Elon Musk that have made the news
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
Could you shed any light on the interaction between these two characters? I know some of the history. I'm just curious about the feud, if there's any insight you might be able to share.
Well, I tell you what, if you're interested in that, the court docket has transcripts of the emails that went back and forth between Elon Musk and Sam Altman. And they're really interesting, if you're into this stuff, because this is all part of the evidence that Elon's lawyers are putting to the judge. And it shows things like Sam sending an email to Elon and saying, well, we want to start this, it has to be nonprofit organization, it has to be open. And the idea is to act as a counterbalance to Google, because at the time in 2015, by then Google had bought DeepMind, and Elon was getting worried about Google controlling AGI potentially. And so that's why they decided, it was actually Elon's idea to call it OpenAI. And now Elon is just absolutely, slamming Sam Altman in public, kind of for reasons that I agree with. I don't agree with Elon Musk on a lot of stuff, but on this point, I think he's kind of right that, Altman started off with these grand promises to do great things, but he has ended up just kind of, acting as a product arm for Microsoft now. I wish I knew more about the relations between Elon Musk and Sam Altman. I don't know how bad it is now. I think the way people in Silicon Valley treat each other when they have bad blood is very carefully, because a lot of them are billionaires or multimillionaires. And, 1 minute someone might be publicly humiliating you, and the next minute they might be funding your company. So it's a really weird state of affairs over there.
Okay. All right, we have time for one more question.
Curious that, the Chinese have provided this system openly to the world. What could they be gaining from the world as a result of providing this? I mean, what hooks could be in their system that they're drawing information from the general public or from, world information that's baked into their DeepSeek model?
Well, I can,
Yeah, I understand. I think I heard that. What can Chinese companies gain from giving their blueprints out to the world with DeepSeek?
Holistic entity, as far as I can see.
Yeah, it's never, we can't always take people at their word, right? That's a really fantastic question, and I don't think anybody really knows for sure what the intentions are, but there are a couple things that they can absolutely get out of this. Number one is reputation. So at the first AI safety summit I was telling you about, I think it was the Chinese vice presidents for science, the Department of Science, came to London, and he was really held at arm's length because of national security concerns. This year at the Paris summit, a much more high-ranking government official who is close to Xi Jinping is coming, and I think he's going to get a very warm welcome. Still, I think a little bit of arm's length, but just China's reputation in AI has really gone up just in the last 2 weeks because of DeepSeek. Absolutely has swapped this this reputation of being an imitator, and now they are innovating. So I think one thing they're gaining is just reputation. Another thing is data, which I think you might have kind of touched on there. If you think about it, when people use chatbots, they provide much more personal data about themselves. People hold conversations with ChatGPT. They'll go into details about, their gender, their age, what they're interested in, their ideas, their children, because they're asking for advice about all sorts of things. And that data can be quite valuable if you're an advertiser or who knows what. So that's another thing that they can gain. And the third thing that they can gain is the ability to steer. This is perhaps the most insidious and worrying, and this is something that people have accused TikTok of doing, is this ability to steer beliefs. Now, there are multiple different chatbots out there, or large language models, like ChatGPT from OpenAI, Gemini from Google, Claude from Anthropic, Grok from Elon Musk's company. Now we've got R1 from DeepSeek. And every single one of these models, actually, they're not completely neutral when it comes to ideology or credo or belief systems. They tend to veer towards in different directions. So DeepSeek is very pro-China. I think Anthropic's Claude tends to look quite positively on law enforcement. So the reason I'm saying this is because there was a really interesting research paper that came out late last year about the ideological differences of language models, and they teased out exactly how these different models were different. And so I think if you were a country or a company and you wanted to plant certain ideas in people's minds, or just promote a certain idea, maybe you would get a language model and train it in such a way that it will promote certain things and put it out to the public. So that's another possibility.
Okay, well, it's pretty close to the hour, so our time is up, but I want to thank you very much for this great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time, and it was great. Have a good day, or night, I should say.
Yes, and thanks to everybody who listened in person and on Zoom. Thank you so much for taking the time and for your fantastic questions. Thank you.
Very good. See ya.
All right, bye.